Hello YouTube. The Daedric cult that almost ended an empire, almost ended the Septim line and helped the Daedric prince Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric prince of chaos, instigate the Oblivion crisis, almost ending the Elder Scrolls universe as we know it. This is the legacy of the Mythic Dawn, a Mehrunes Dagon worshipping cult under their leader Manar Cameron, who with Mehrunes Dagon played the antagonist role in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. In this video I'll tell you their story and what beliefs drove them to those extreme actions. So without any further ado, let's roll the intro and talk about the Mythic Dawn. So, the Mythic Dawn, a Daedric cult of the Daedric prince Mehrunes Dagon that nearly toppled an empire and destroyed the world. In its heyday during the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, it was a large-scale secretive Daedric cult which had a large membership base all around Tamriel, as hundreds if not thousands of Tamriel citizens were led to believe in the secretive cult's heretical beliefs. We know that all across Tamriel they had members, from agents and assassins carrying out the cult's business, to belief spreaders and even a lot of sleeper agents in a network all across Tamriel. That network was eventually used by the cult leadership to assassinate the Tamrielic Emperor, Emperor Uriel Septim VII, and all his heirs. But what drove that many people to join the Mythic Dawn? Well, the Mythic Dawn offers an interesting alternative to most Tamrielic mythologies, a different view as to the structure of the universe and what the end goal of a mortal should be on Tamriel. You see, most people on Tamriel believe a variation of the following story. There's three types of gods: Aedra, or divines, Daedra and Magna-Gi. And most people believe a variation on that the mortal plane of existence, Mundus, was created by a spirit named Lorkhan, who together with a large group of other powerful spirits started constructing the mortal plane at the very beginning of time. This all went pretty well, until the spirits that were helping Lorkhan discovered that building this mortal plane actually drained their power and vitality. This led to a conflict while creating the mortal world, and while the different religions on Tamriel disagree about the exact order of events, what happened in most religions is that it's said that some spirits fled creation when they discovered this, that their power was being drained, which then ripped holes into the mortal plane, which then became the stars. These fleeing spirits became the Magna-Gi, while some other spirits stayed behind to finish creation. These spirits were called the Aedra and allegedly lost a lot of their power in creation and would later come to be known as the Divines like Akatosh, Dibella, Stendar and many other gods, even some from other pantheons. Meanwhile, the Daedra were those spirits who refused to even participate from the start and never had anything to do with creation. Now, these Aedric spirits, who would later become many of Tamriel's most common gods, viewed Lorkhan either as a trickster or as an outright enemy, depending on the religion, after they discovered that their power was being drained. And they then punished him for tricking them into creating the mortal plane by severing him from his heart. A variation of this story exists in many of Tamriel's religions. However, the members of the Mythic Dawn believe that the history of the universe as told by most priests on Tamriel is a blatant lie, and that the Aedra are false gods. You see, the Mythic Dawn believes that Lorkhan was a Daedric prince, the original Daedric prince of change, and that the mortal plane, Mundus, was supposed to be his Daedric realm of oblivion. But that it was the Aedra who betrayed him by stealing his domain for themselves, and according to them, this betrayal caused the Magna-Gi to flee creation before Lorkhan's plane was properly finished. This caused for Lorkhan's creature creations, like Daedric creatures, like Dremora so to say, to be severed from his divinity and led them to become mortal instead of immortal like the Daedric creatures that we encounter in the games, who after they've been slain regenerate in Oblivion and are unable to come back. These creations of Lorkhan, these creatures, his immortal Daedric servants, that was supposed to be us, or well, the now mortals of Tamriel. The Mythic Dawn viewed this mortality that the betrayer gods pushed upon them as an injustice, and see the Aedric gods as betrayers who took our immortal birthright, which the Daedric prince Lorkhan envisioned from us, and they took that away. They then believe that the Magna-Gi, the faithful of Lorkhan, who fled after the betrayers killed him, created Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric prince of chaos and change, as a sort of concerned brother to Lorkhan, intended to be his avenger and take back his brother's creation and set the world right once more, giving mortals their immortality back and stamping out the betrayer Aedra. That is, in very short, what they believe. Now, if you want to see an excellent 40-minute analysis and explanation of their beliefs and some more of the justifications on why they believe it, I'll put a link in the description of this video to a video by fellow Elder Scrolls YouTuber Daroloth, who examined the text of the Mythic Dawn until he became a madman, and he can explain their beliefs in far greater detail and in far better analysis than I ever could. So be sure to check out this video after this one if you're up for some more mythology. But what I told you is the basis of the Mythic Dawn's beliefs. They believe that it is necessary to give Mehrunes Dagon access to the mortal plane so that he can set things right and give them their birthright to immortality and remake them in the image that Lorkhan had originally envisioned. But where do these beliefs originate from? Well, they originate from the foundational text of the Mythic Dawn, Manar Cameron's commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes, a 4-volume book series which outlines the foundational beliefs of the Mythic Dawn as written down by their leader, the half-high elven Manar Cameron. Again, if you want to see a thorough analysis of all those writings, check out Daroloth's video in the description. Now, Manar Cameron is very much a subject for his own video, but what you need to know is that he allegedly is the son of Haemon Cameron, a Bosmer king of Valenwood who would come to be known as the Camoran Usurper, as he nearly toppled the empire using an army of undead and Daedra 166 years before his alleged son would nearly topple the empire with his Mythic Dawn cult. It was a young Manar Cameron who became a devout follower of Mehrunes Dagon, even becoming a champion in the eyes of the Daedric Lord, which led Mehrunes Dagon to bestow upon his follower the so-called Mysterium Xarxes, a Daedric artifact in the shape of a book filled with Mehrunes Dagon's own words, his own profane knowledge and his own great power. Now, for mere mortals, it's dangerous to even look at the pages, as any normal reader would easily be overwhelmed and corrupted by its content, and only one of great will and power, or a champion of the Daedric Prince himself, may safely read it. From within the pages of the Mysterium Xarxes, Manar Cameron distilled his theology and wrote his commentaries, the 4 books which would come to be used as a guide and indoctrinate many of Tamriel's citizens into the Mythic Dawn. But his theology is not the only thing that he grasped from the pages of the Mysterium Xarxes. From its pages he also learned how to create his own pocket realm of Oblivion, within Mehrunes Dagon's own realm. This realm he would go on to call Gaiar Alata, or Paradise, and he promised that his and Mehrunes Dagon's followers would there be granted immortality, until they would be able to receive it in the Mundus, which would by then, in their endgame, be a Daedric plane. And that their immortal spirits would in Paradise be trained to eventually rule the mortal plane once Dagon had retaken it from the betrayers. At first, Manar Cameron tried to spread his own beliefs openly, but he was ignored by the masses, and then, according to his own words, he started preaching these beliefs in secret, and slowly, most likely attracted by the mystique of such a secretive alternative heretical belief, he gained followers and was able to found the Mythic Dawn. Although it's also possible that the Mythic Dawn already existed in some form and that he simply came to lead it at this point in time. Mostly everything points towards him founding it, but a possible typo in one of Oblivion's voice actor scripts dates the Mythic Dawn earlier than his birth, so yeah, that may also be possible. Anyway, Manar Cameron had gained quite a massive following by the time of Oblivion. Loyal true believers who believed that by following him, someone who according to his followers could converse with Mehrunes Dagon as an equal, they would one day become immortal and become the new ruling class when Mehrunes Dagon would walk Tamriel again. These people turned their backs upon the Aedra, who according to Cameron were weak and cowardly, and started working to get their lord into the mortal plane. But that was not too easy. You see, ever since the first era when the first Dragonborn Emperor started ruling the Empire, starting with the slave queen Alessia who had freed humanity from their alien elf oppressors, Tamriel had been protected against the invasions by the Daedra. The story goes that as long as a descendant of the first Dragonborn Empress, Alessia, would wear the Amulet of Kings, a sacred amulet which allegedly houses the souls of Alessia and her descendants, as long as a Dragonborn Emperor wore that, her descendants would be able to light the dragon fires in the Temple of the One in the Imperial city, which then kept the so-called liminal barrier in place, which prevented Mehrunes Dagon or any other Daedric prince from doing too much crazy stuff on Tamriel. So, extremely oversimplified, if Dragonborn Emperor light fire with amulet, Mehrunes Dagon go fuck himself. Alright? So, as Manar Cameron, what do you do then? You start using your cult followers to work on a plan of making sure that the Emperor and his heirs are killed off and that the Amulet of Kings is stolen, so that none may light the fires ever again, and the liminal barrier disappears, making your lord Mehrunes Dagon able to conquer the mortal plane and set things right, at least according to them. This part of their plan is actually successful. After years of intense preparations and spying and infiltration, in which they even have one of their agents secretly marry one of the Emperor's sons, watch my video on that for the full story, they got into position and murdered Emperor Uriel Septim II and all his heirs, and eventually even managed to steal the Amulet of Kings. Of course, the Mythic Dawn never learned of the Emperor's bastard son Martin, who together with the hero played by the player in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, the hero of Kvatch, would go on to foil their plans by killing Manar Cameron in his paradise and then beating back Mehrunes Dagon himself as he tried to walk the face of Nirn, by Martin sacrificing himself and transforming into an avatar of Akatosh, which then defeated Mehrunes Dagon and permanently sealed the barriers between Nirn and Oblivion, ensuring that no Daedric prince would ever be able to threaten the mortal plane again on that scale, or so was the plan. But even that would in the end not really prove true, although it did make things harder. But that's a subject for another video on how that all worked. That being said, what happened to the Mythic Dawn after their plans were foiled? Well, first of all, those who died and went to Manar Cameron's so-called paradise soon discovered that it was a paradise exclusively for Manar Cameron. Within it, they were put to slavery and were tortured. What a great afterlife. Although kinda deserved after what happened, but hey. I read a theory online somewhere that the torture is supposed to make their souls immortal in some way, so that Manar Cameron actually never lied to them. But I don't know, it still kinda feels like a scam if you promise people paradise, but it's not like they care what I say. Now, second, the followers that still lived by the end of the Oblivion crisis mostly disintegrated. From what we know, most people on Tamriel were not even aware of the Mythic Dawn's involvement in the start of the Oblivion crisis, but once they found out about the Mythic Dawn's involvement, dedicated groups of hunters started hunting down the remaining Mythic Dawn faithful and started to exterminate them and their remaining bases wherever they could. They even managed to get their hands on Mehrunes' Razor, one of the artifacts of the Mythic Dawn and Mehrunes Dagon worship, and they managed to break it into 3 pieces, which then led to the whole creation of the Keepers of the Razor, as they called themselves, as they tried to keep the different pieces of Mehrunes' Razor apart from each other as long as they could, in order to make sure that the Daedric Prince could never entice people with it again to do really bad stuff on Tamriel. Now, it was only really until 200 years later or so, in the 4th era, around the time of Skyrim, that the Mythic Dawn gained at least some historical recognition again, in the Dawnstar Mythic Dawn Museum, where we can do a quest with Silas Vesuvius, someone who is a descendant of some Mythic Dawn members, who tried to start a museum, and nobody really liked that, because it turns out that even 200 years later, people are still kinda mad at the Mythic Dawn. In that quest we can also find some of the descendants of the Keepers of the Razor, and we can, take the different parts of Mehrunes' Razor, bring them back together. That quest. Now, something that most people don't know is that in Creation Club content, which has been confirmed to be more or less canon, the Mythic Dawn even have a very short-lived revival when a priest named Vonos gets a vision sent to him by Mehrunes Dagon, and he managed to reopen an Oblivion Gate using pieces of old Oblivion Gates they dug up all around Skyrim, and using the presence of the soul of the last Dragonborn, the player character in Skyrim, in order to reopen that Oblivion Gate, trying to unleash a second Oblivion crisis. But Vonos was killed by us, and that portal, which he did manage to permanently open, was put under the surveillance of the Vigilance of Stendarr, who will probably find a way to close it at some point, although if that piece of Creation Club content is the source of a second Oblivion invasion in the Elder Scrolls 6, well, I guess you heard it here first, folks. I mean, Creation Club content seems to be canon, since Bethesda themselves paid for creators to make it for them on their instructions. So, hey, we might never know, but it seems like the creators of those Creation Club content DLCs actually got a lot of freedom in how they wrote, and they didn't really get a lot of input, so I don't know how the canonicity of that is, but it felt worth to at least mention it. And that is the story of the Mythic Dawn, or at least most of the story. Again, if you want to see a full analysis of their beliefs, like a 40-minute deep dive, go to Darrell's channel. He made an amazing video, and he deserves all the views he can get. As for my content, I've been making some more Oblivion related content, so if you're into Oblivion related content, check out some of the links in the description where I have some more Oblivion related videos. Or, check out my regular Elder Scrolls lore output. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video and if I managed to teach you something new about the Elder Scrolls lore today, consider dropping a like, as that's how the YouTube algorithm decides which content is worthy and which isn't. Anyway, all that's left for me to be done is to thank my top Patreon supporters, Mr. Bernardo Binda, Gabriel Binda, Doji, Hunter Joe, KLegendM, King Chris 20, RB Dash, Volkir of Argonia, Devin Mattingly, Rakai and Sword of Bushido. These people, along with all the others on screen, keep my channel afloat, and for that I am very grateful. That said, I will see you all in the next Elder Scrolls lore video. probably next week.